saddle tree, and we are moving on to our stitching for the horn. All right, so I like to have 2 stitching awls with me for the horn and then for the cannel, based on what thicknesses they're going to be. So a smaller, sharper one, well, smaller one for the horn so I can see where it's going, but a longer one for the cannel, but doubling up for when you're finding the cannel points, you can use both of them, you know. So this one's not so short that it can't go through enough of you know, 1 inch of leather. But anyway, what you want to do is use your smaller one, and you want to make sure that you're in a good position where you can see the other side of your horn, or the underside of your horn, and see where this is going. Now, depending on what direction you want to go, either this way or that way, you should have, now there's a diamond shape to the stitching awl, right? And one of those points should be either going in or out, okay? But you're not gonna alternate them. It's going to be the same each time. So I like to start here on this side, and each diamond tip is going out, all right? And then we're also trying to find inside that tickle line that we did when we were putting in the gullet piece or the neck piece. So you just want to find that bottom, and now you don't want to stitch into the neck where it starts to come down. You don't want to start stitching into here. You just want to keep it up here where it's going to be nice and tight, because you've already pushed the material there. Now we want to keep it there. And as for where we're starting, okay, we're going to start not at this point, but the next one. Because if we start here, we're going to create too tight of a line where this cut is coming in, and there's going to be a cut piece here. Now you could do a half step, but again, you're bringing these 2 points together and these 2 points together. Something's happening where you're going to create a cut line or a tear point. All right. So get your saddle down, nice and cinched to your stand. I'm gonna start. And you want your diamonds to match up. This is why I like using these type of stitching wheels, because when it makes the pattern, it's actually making that little cross X, that cross hatch. And you can use that to line up your points of your diamond and your stitching awl. So as we're going around, we're going to keep that point out. Okay? And we're going to find, there we are. Hopefully you guys can see that, where it's just coming into that groove right here. So it's not hitting the leather here, and it's not too far out this way, okay? It's just in that channel that we created. Now, once you find that position, you want to piston your arm, so it's not gonna move very much from that point. And you just want to be a machine. You want to start to remember, this is all about hand-eye coordination, needle-point coordination, where you become a machine and it's not moving too much. And you just want to keep a perpendicular to the surface of your horn. You don't want to try to weave around and dodge your horn on the inside or try to get tighter. You're gonna mess it up that way. more than likely you're gonna hit glue or you're gonna hit your horn piece, and then you're gonna jack up your awl. All right, boom. And you wanna go all the way through because you may hit the top side here. So you just wanna go through enough where you're not making an indentation with the base of your awl, okay? And if you're sweaty like me, get your glove on so you're not slipping your hand all the way around. And I've just bought some regular, pig skin or deer skin, and then cut the fingers off of them, okay? And you're doing a slight little wiggle as you cut through. Not a whole lot. And with each one, you're resetting just ever so slightly your grip on the awl so that diamond can still be in the places and positions it needs to be going around your stitch. So you're offsetting the points so they don't come together and make a tear point, all right? You're offsetting the diamond so that there's enough material in between each stitch. Get back to setting in your groove. Now, if you're getting a lot of displacement here, you can start stitching. However, we've got a pretty good piece. We don't have too much cellular displacement happening in the gullet piece. You can see that it is, sometimes as I push through, it wiggles the leather just a little bit, but not enough for me to worry about that it's gonna displace my stitching awl when I use my jerk needle. So I'm gonna come all the way around to the front before I reposition the saddle tree. Or maybe just 2/5 of the way. See, I'm slightly getting just a little bit ahead of myself on the bottom side, and so I want to go straighten that out. Getting some cellular disruption. It's pushing through, but we're still holding, so I think I'll just finish making the stitch whole. And if you're sweating, don't grip your leather because it's going to mark. Make a sweat mark. So hopefully you've made clean indentations even with your rough out horn cap, so you can see the stitch marks and not assume that one bump or something is a stitch mark and accidentally get off course. So as you're stitching through, you want to make sure that you have the same distance between stitches on top and on bottom. And that's going to come with time. So I'm going to switch, and you guys may not see this point because, but I will try. There we are. To keep my head out of the way. Getting a little close. Yep, got it, that one. That's not the goal. But if you can catch it in time, you can stop, redirect your awl. But you don't want to try to push and redirect your awl as you're halfway through. Otherwise you'll bend the needle. So again, we're not going to stop at the last hole, we're going to stop just ahead of it so we don't create too tight of an area that it's going to tear through. All right, now we can start stitching. I like to use a wax thread. I usually like to use a braided thread. As I've moved to another shop, a lot of the stuff that I had was in the other shop. So anyway, I've got some wax thread right here. This is a 3.5 inch cap, raw size of the horn. So I'm going to do an arm. If it was just a 3-inch cap, I'd be able to get away with a full arm's length, you know, and that's probably enough, or even an arm's length and a half. But I'm going to do 2 arm's lengths, or at least 1 3/4. And that should be enough to go around, but also still have enough for me to hold on to and tighten what I need to. So if this wasn't already waxed and it was just braided thread, get yourself a beeswax stick and run it through this, the thread through it, okay? Where's the jerk needle? So again, I'm going to start on this side because that's what I prefer to do. And I don't know if you guys can see that, but that's just a basic jerk needle, or a stitching needle. And it's got a groove on one side, or a half eye, so I can loop on the bottom side and pull through. And we're just going to pull to where it's half and half and centered on the horn cap. Okay? And there are different ways of doing this. There are different ways of stitching. I'm going to show you one away. And when I do it, I'm just going to do a basic stitch on each one, all right? Just pulling through like a sewing machine would, creating a single loop on the bottom side. And when I say a lock stitch, I'm going to pull the thread through twice and pull it up, all right? So that it actually makes a lock stitch through that loop once I pull it tight, all right? Now, when you're running a sewing machine and you do a pass over, that's what I also call a lock stitch, or again, passing over. If you guys are doing enough of this and your hands are wet or soggy, it's just going to help just using gloves, all right? Go through, you're gonna make a loop, and this is what the fall, as I call, is always on the outside, okay? The loop, you know, that is are working as it comes up. The fall, this loose part, is going to be on the outside, all right? So you want it, regardless of whatever you call it or however you do this, you want it to be either on the inside continuously or the outside continuously. If you're not paying attention, your stitch look is going to look random and off, and it's not going to be a nice and smooth line on the top side. So again, my fall is on the outside. I do this as well with the camel. Falls on the outside, I pick up, pull through. And walk the stitch to the center, all right? I'm not trying to saw it in because you're going to weaken your thread that way. You just want a nice, tight, single pull. Falls on the outside, and this one I will pass through a second time, making a lock stitch, okay? Pull the loop, and then walk it through, maintaining the pressure on the top and the bottom. Now, if you get good enough, and you're gonna make a few stitches here, we're going to check the lengths one more time. And we're just gonna make sure that we are not off, but apparently I'm already off because I pulled something through going through that first time around, or it got hung up on something. But if they're the same length, you know you're pulling through evenly. Falls on the outside. And you can miss the lock stitch on this one or do another one. But I'd suggest making a little lock stitch or double pass every 10 or 20, or at least every position. So I'd do here on the side, the front, the side, and on the back side again. So maybe 5 or 6 of them, equally dispersed throughout your horn, okay? So if something were to happen, it's not gonna unravel the entire thing. So as long as your horn pieces are not so wet that you have a hydro effect working against the water, but right now it's dry and it'll tighten because it's all nice casing leather, and it will still shrink a little bit more, but not too much at this point. But everything should still be tight. So you're looking for the same kind of casing as when you're tooling, something that's about the same color as it is dry, but it's damp to the touch. All right. Make sure your fall's on the outside. I'm on the outside. or the midpoint, I'm going to make a double stitch or double pull, lock stitch, and pull it through. Falls on the outside. Now again, there's a few other ways of doing this. I'm not going to discuss them in this video, but I will discuss them in another video if you guys want to know other stitching ways. All right. Now when you're doing the front, you want to be careful that you're not getting a stitch line on your fork lip, okay? You don't want to accidentally draw it out that far. So for this one, I'm gonna do double stitch or double pull, lock stitch, set it, all right? And we're gonna take a look. Now I haven't varied too much. There we go, all right? But if you get far off, all right, you can pull through, bring this one back up, depending on which one's longer than the other, all right? Pull through and alternate your top stitch and your bottom stitch strings, okay? And get to where if you have a tendency of pulling too far down or pulling too far up, but acknowledging that and making sure you're trying to get your stitch knot at the center, but you can accommodate the process that you have or the tendency you have by alternating your strings from top to bottom or bottom to top. And as you get closer to the last few stitches, you'll want to make a series of lock stitches. Maybe alternating, and the last 2 or 3 in a row be lock stitches. Making sure your fall's on the outside, okay? And as I do the lock stitch, I'm going towards the inside, okay? And that was with all of them. And lock stitch one more time for the last one. Falls on the outside, pull to the inside. Drop your loop and set it. Now, there we go. Nice and stitched. What you'll do now, burn these off. Be careful not to make an excess burn that looks big and gnarly. Just something that's a nice pointed hot blade or hot knife. Then you'll go over with the overstitch one more time. So that each, do it without gloves, so that each stitch is set and looks a little bit better, looks a little bit cleaner, because right now, again, the leather's still casing, so we can keep its shape and it'll take its impressions right now. But again, don't get off of the line. And continue on whatever way you were going. Don't try to go from left to right and then right to left. Okay? So now that the stitches are seated, it looks really nice. So we're going to allow it to case just a little bit more. We'll have these burned, and then we'll cut and edge our horn. All right, so we're ready to cut our horn, the excess piece off, and then edge it, right? This is still casing, just a little bit less wet, but it's at a good place where the leather's still soft, so we can cut it evenly and edge it nicely, right? So one of the things I want to talk to you guys about is when you're edging, when you're cutting it, you want to taper the back towards the inside. And I really don't want to use a pen on this, but in order for you guys to see it, I'm gonna have to. And then I'll edge it off, and hopefully it doesn't smear everywhere. But what you're looking for is a nice continuous curvature. And this is what I was talking about before with that point, right? So it's exaggerated now, it's come out this point, you know, but it's still a pretty nice curve, you know. We just got this little wedge that may be a little bit too much there, but we want to blend that corner in. We want this to blend in with the rest of the horn, because we don't want to just cut it off and then edge it here, because it's not going to look pretty. So I gauge it to about, 5 or 6 stitches in. And you're just gonna make a nice curve. And just flow the line. And I try to use my wrist as a pivot point. Okay. Along with my fingers and knuckles to be the gauge. So I don't know if you guys can see that, but also the little rough out filaments kind of gotten in the way, but this is a little bit closer to that point. There's a little tag there, but we want it to go towards the outside line and then come back in, all right? And then we will tap that in with a hammer, all right, just a little bit, so that it all lines up nicely. And there are a couple of different methods for cutting your horn excess. You could use a round knife as long as it's really sharp, but notice that as you're coming around with your round knife, it will leave a bevel cut. It's gonna scoop out. Now this is exaggerated, but it's going to be something like this as it comes around, because it's never going to be perpendicular to the actual edge that you're cutting, because the cutting point is here and it's going to taper away as it comes around. And it's going to taper away the more distance away from center of the cut that you're gonna be. So if you're dropping your handle just a little bit and then that center of the cut is going to change. And this is another reason that this tip becomes rolling, or the edge becomes rolling, because some people aren't holding this correctly, all right? So when you get good at it, it looks nice, but in the meantime, just use a straight blade, holding the blade perpendicular to the surface or the angle, right? So our angle is here. We want it perpendicular to that all the way around. And you can pivot your hand as you're cutting when you're doing this, all right? So let's get to a place where I can show you guys what's going on. And we're going to pull, okay? Now, if you guys haven't already done so, strop your blade to make it nice and smooth and an edge that's cut worthy, okay? And you want to be aware that you're not going to hit your surface, as I just did, all right? So bring it, just pulling up ever so much, okay? Now that what I just described to you can happen if you're not, having the cutting edge be level with the actual cut portion. Because if you're leading with the top and trailing at the bottom, then you're gonna leave a cut that's at an angle all the way around your horn, all right? So you need to practice this, get good, maybe redo a couple of horns as you're doing it, because this is the point where if you don't have a sharp enough blade, you will screw up or hurt yourself, or screw up the horn and then just have to redo it again. So with as much pressure as you're cutting, you don't want to end your cut here coming in, okay? Because it's going to release and your hand's gonna move and quicker, and the blade's gonna move quicker than you want. So get to just about here and then come the other direction, all right? Yep. Hopefully you guys can see. Arms in the way. Okay, I'm going to come the other direction and just lifting my blade up, trying to meet that point. Okay, and maybe come back at this point. So you can clean that point up, okay? But if you were to end here, there's a tendency of, cutting the backside of your horn, and you don't want to do that. All right. So look at it now. I probably for the sake of this was a little too slow and a little too wary, but I do have a little bit of a downward bevel. All right, it's not as bad as some, but in order to get rid of some of that and some of the start and stops, which is not too bad, just take the other side of your shoe and rasp and run alongside it, or if you need to, just get the bigger side, and you're gonna do nice full rasps, just clean that curvature up, all right? And if you need to come from the other side, go from the other side. All right, so you need to just get used to rolling your hand around, and I got a little bit of a there. All right, now get your horn pliers back up, and you're going to squeeze everything again. Now again, you want the flat side on the top and the angle side on the bottom, okay? And you're just going to squeeze. You're not going to try to find your horn cap. You're squeezing just over your stitch, okay? And of course I'm in my own way. And you don't want to change the angle of your arm at this point. You just want to maintain that same level all the way around. All right? Check it again. We're looking all right. It's not the best, but it's not the worst. Okay? All right. Now, if there's a little bit of flyaways, don't worry about it for right now. Okay? You're gonna take your number 4 edger or number 5 edger, whichever you need, based on the thickness of the leather you're using. Okay? And we want to have that foot end up on center, okay? So I'm gonna use this number 4, but that bottom foot is gonna be where my filler is, all right? So I wanna do that to both top and bottom pieces, edge around, and at least a single continuous move. Try as best as you can. I like to, again, start from one side. And you also want to make sure that the leg will be always the same point on the top side as well, so that reveal is the same from the stitch line.